started with that.
Okay.
We are recording now, and we'll get started. So I wanted to. I thought this was a funny little road sign here. The Postpartum Angels Guide to Virtual Support, and we're kind of going in a new direction now, out of need. That we just have been hearing from a lot of our volunteers and a lot of our families that in-person support is a little bit uncomfortable and not always a good fit, but we know that we can still do this in a way that works for people. And there's a lot of things that we can still do very effectively virtually, that we did before in person and actually can translate really well as long as there's good connectivity and the technology is working. So that can be a barrier sometimes, but otherwise this can work great. Hi there, Julie. Welcome. Glad you're here. So I will get started. Julie, I just wanted you to know that we're recording, just so fair warning. And so here I thought this really spoke to me, just thinking about the direction that we're going in. We are not in Kansas anymore, Toto. We are in a whole different landscape, but people still have the same need for social support. We're just delivering it in a really different way. Recently at a meeting, the icebreaker question was, if your organization was a kind of car, what would it be? And I had to think about it for a while. And I think good beginnings would be an F-150 that is in the mechanic shop being re-engineered into a spaceship, because we need to be built for something very different. So I'm really thankful to the volunteers that are doing this for us and willing to dip a toe into this new landscape that we're in. So I thought we could do a little icebreaker question here, and I'd love to hear just a name, and if you had a choice of magically being able to fly or breathe underwater, what would you choose? So I had time to think about this, so I'll go first, and I would definitely choose flying. I get a lot. I feel like I'm flying when I'm on my bike and when I'm on skis, and that's the best feeling ever. So that was my preference. What about you, Terry?
I would also choose flying. It's something I've always thought about. I would love to be able to do. And I feel like underwater, like you can do with devices, and it's not necessarily that different, but flying in an airplane is very different than just flying.
Yeah. Thank you. Awesome. And Julie?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would fly, definitely.
Yeah.
I get too claustrophobic underwater. I've tried snorkeling, which I love snorkeling. It's great, beautiful things to see, and it's cool. But would never. I'm really fearful of like scuba diving, being trapped under the water, where I couldn't breathe. Just terrifies me. So definitely fly.
Thank you, guys. Cool. Okay, so we'll jump right in and get started talking about this model. Just a brief introduction is that I have done this now since March, and I've done it with several different families. It worked really well for some. It didn't work well for others. There were some obstacles, but for the people that it did work for, they found it very valuable. And so we're going to continue with it on a broader scale, hopefully. So it's the same as the in-person visits. It's a 12-week time. The visits are shorter, 35 minutes, when there's no baby to hold and chores to do, and you're just talking. 35 minutes is really what we found to be a good time. And that's usually around the time we spend checking in with, at least for me at my visits. Like I'm usually engaged with the family at least 35 minutes in some kind of companionship conversation, checking in with them and trying to draw them out and support them emotionally. So We do have some adapted services and resources that we're doing, and I thought it would be helpful to show you those as well. I just want to make sure you're still seeing this, the right screen. And of course, it's going to take time to load. I'll just talk about them while it's loading. Can you see them here on my screen? I'm scrolling down. Yes, okay, I'm seeing people nodding. So there's our virtual postpartum angel support, and people can click and sign up. We're offering our Journey into Parenthood workshop virtually now. We're doing it more often to try to line up with people's due dates. And that's just preparation for postpartum. So it's all the things that everyone wished someone had told them, condensed into 3 hours. We do our best to prepare people for what they're coming home to after they bring, after they have their babies, and how to take care of themselves. We're offering a virtual baby circle. These are all things we previously did and now have, now we're offering them online. And that's every week. And that's a great resource. People are signing up for that in addition to the visits and the check-in times with volunteers a lot more as well, we're seeing. And then we're also doing an in-person baby stroll, which is on Fridays, and that's every week, and we're outside, and we're just going to keep doing that year round, and that's meeting in Montpelier. And I know that the Janet S. Munt Family Room in Chittenden County is doing something similar. So if you're working with a family out that way, that's something good to know. And that's another thing, is that we may be working with families that are outside of our local community. So that's part of what we're trying to figure out, is how to help volunteers bring together additional resources for families who may have a need, for those families who live outside of our local community. We may not be familiar. And for that, I recommend 211, calling 211, maybe even with the family on the line with you, or on their behalf, and asking, hey, what is there for families with new babies and very young children? What's going on in this region, in the region that my family is from? There are some similar responsibilities to before as far as volunteering. We're trying to provide those 35-minute check-ins weekly as much as possible. We understand sometimes weeks go by. It certainly happened to me. If that's happening, like if it's more than 2 weeks gone by, let's work together on figuring out a plan for reconnecting with the family. We try to deliver the welcome bags still. If that's convenient for a volunteer to do, wonderful. If it's not, we can find other volunteers to help with that. So we'll work on that together, coordinating, making sure the family gets the gets the welcome bag, excuse me. I am sending them a virtual PDF version of it, as far as the vital information goes. So the gifty things, we still want to get to them somehow, but they will have those resources in advance of the services starting, the informational resources. So important for us to be the initiate of the contact. We can't depend on the family to be reaching out to us. We have to reach out to them. And I've heard from a lot of volunteers like, oh, I'm not sure if it's me or my voice. It's usually just because someone's busy or they've lost interest in the program or they're overwhelmed. It's usually never the sweet volunteer that's trying to reach out and support them. So we're reaching out and trying to, even if we're doing like text messages, just thinking of you, taking a picture of something beautiful, like the foliage or a flower, something uplifting, and continuing to, it's like throwing things against the wall and see what sticks. We're throwing pitches and we're trying to see what sticks. And sometimes it can take a little while to establish a connection this way with the family. And sometimes it works and sometimes we fall off with them and it doesn't work. But it's worth it for the time that it works. It's worth all the effort. When we're talking, when we're meeting, we're trying to stay focused on their needs, and especially their physical and emotional well-being. So always asking about that every single time in different ways as much as we can. And sometimes we'll find out something concerning that maybe they need to call to their doctor, or maybe there is a need for additional resources that we can help with as far as mental health goes. We have great support, great resources for mental health. We have a whole referral system to get people into therapy quickly. So if there's ever a concern about emotional or physical health, we want to be tuned into that and helping connect with resources there. And of course, good listening skills, we'll talk more about that, verbal and facial expressions to communicate we're paying attention. Getting started with virtual support. So the beginning starts with the match as usual. I'm texting and emailing the families before I even match them, having a phone conversation with them, getting a sense of this family and their needs and their personality, and offering the different menu of services to them that we have. And for those that choose the virtual support, I'm matching them with a volunteer, and then the volunteer picks up with the texting and the emailing and the phone calls. I've found that families respond really well to text and email first. And I kind of say, hey, this is Anna with Good Beginnings, checking in with you about our Postpartum Angel service. Can I give you a call later? Or I'll do that in an email, depending on what information I have. Sometimes I'll do both. And then I'll follow up with a phone call. So they know, I'll tell them like, hey, my area code is this, because I have a weird area code, I'll give them a heads up about that. And I'd like to call you this day around this time. Does that work for you? And I like a phone call to start with rather than a video chat, just because it seems a little bit more casual. They can get a sense of our voice without having because the face-to-face is kind of an intense thing to start with. So starting with a phone call is great. And then we're trying to schedule the weekly appointment in that first connection. So we're trying to assess what works for this family, what works for me, what can I offer this family? What's their tech situation? This is kind of a new question that we have to be asking. Do they have good internet connection? What software are they using for visual chat, for video chats? And during that conversation of what works as far as the schedule and what works as far as the tech, if we pick up on like not adequate connectivity resources, we now have an awesome new program that it has funding to support families in getting adequate connectivity so that they can receive services. We don't want anyone being, falling by the wayside just because they don't have the vital tools that they need to get these services. So we would work directly with them. The volunteer would say there's a connectivity issue, and we would pick up with the family and work with them separately. And if you find that if that's the situation, we can prioritize phone calls for the time being until the connectivity issue is resolved. So we would prioritize making sure we reach out to them by phone or text as much as possible in the meantime, at least once a week, and seeing how they're doing. And in that initial outreach, you can let them know, like, I'm a postpartum angel, and you can tell me if something's wrong. If you if you're worried about something, let me know. We want people to feel that there's open communication here and they can trust us to help them with whatever's wrong. And I do ask everyone if they can to remember to let me know if you connected with somebody, whether that's every other week or every week, however it works best. There's a fillable form on our website that you can click on the link and actually bookmark it in the browser on your screen, so that you can see easily how to report your hours. And this just lets me know that the visits are happening, so I can coordinate and know that people are getting the support. Here's some questions to ask. These are only suggestions. I've found that a lot of people have a lot to say and I haven't been at a loss of like conversation in these meetings. But I thought it would be good, like if there ever was like a dull moment in the conversation, just to have like a little bit of a list of things that could be helpful to get the conversation flowing. So I always like to congratulate every single family, every single new parent. I like to frame it in a really positive way. That parenthood is a journey and there's ups and downs, and welcome to the fold. Finding out how old their child is that can help parents get talking, or how pregnant they are. Letting them know, again, they can be open and honest about anything they're feeling, and letting them know that the talks are confidential. How is the pregnancy or adoption? That's a great conversation starter. Do you have any infant care or parenting questions for me? What's a typical day like for you? What's a typical night like for you? Those are all open-ended, no yes or no questions. And then going a little deeper, depending on the rapport that you feel you're establishing with your client. How is the birth? What's it like to be a new parent? Or what's it like to be a parent of 2 or 3? Finding out if they're doing anything special to take care of themselves. And if they're kind of like, no, what do you like to do to take care of yourself? What would you like to be doing, if you could? Asking about physical health after the baby is super important, just because so many people struggle with their physical health. They're feeling weak. They're having issues with nursing, maybe they've had a cesarean and they're unable to rest adequately because they have older children. And it's really good for us to be aware of that, because then we could help them seek help for themselves, and perhaps wrap more support around them if they're really needing that. I love to remind people that I'm not a healthcare provider. I often hear, this is happening and should this smell this way? And it's like, well, that's a good doctor question. And, new parents, I even myself included, like when I was a new parent, I really didn't know like when I was supposed to call the doctor or not. And it can be helpful to have someone with a little wisdom and experience say like, hey, yeah, that's a good doctor question. Why don't you give your doctors a call? Asking about the partner, if there's a partner, finding out what that experience has been like for the partner. And what about the older kids? How are they doing with this? We all know older kids have their worlds rocked pretty good by the birth of a new baby. All right, moving on to mental health. So acknowledging how hard the transition to parenting is for most people. Like it's tough, and there's a lot of changes going on simultaneously in our lives. How is it going? How are you going? How are you doing with this transition? Very common for parents to go through the baby blues. How has that happened for you at all? Typically people experience some baby blues around day 4 or 3 postpartum, when the milk comes in and the hormones are coursing through the body and there's a lot of weepiness, kind of like during PMS, and things that we might brush off and not get distressed about. We can actually find really distressing on those particular days. And sometimes people actually think they're depressed and they worry, and then it adds to their feeling of anxiety. And so it's good to reassure people that, oh, if you had that, that's really, really normal and common. If it's lasting longer than 2 weeks for you, please let me know, because I would want to support you through that, and help you get more resources. And if they do share with you, if there's a disclosure that they're really struggling and they don't feel like themselves, maybe you can say to them that, have you told anybody else how you're feeling? It's really common that this happens to people postpartum, and they're very treatable when they're treated early. Can I help you get connected with treatment? You can even go deeper and say, like, a lot of people think about hurting themselves when they're feeling really badly. Is this happening for you? And then, if they say yes, that is a point where our confidentiality policy is no longer, doesn't cover that, like if someone's going to hurt themselves or anyone else, so that we would want to swoop in and help you support them. And so you would share it with us. So it's still confidential within the organization, but not for the volunteer to carry all by themselves. We would want to be involved and then plan for that. Oh my goodness, talking about rest. Did you sleep last night? Can you sleep if given the opportunity? Notice so does your baby sleep through the night? Not that I think that any of you would ever ask that question, because I know that you probably wouldn't, but that's a charged question, but it is nice to ask, how did you sleep? How's that going for you? And do you have an appetite? How are you eating? Checking in on practical support, asking them if there's anyone else they can talk to about their feelings at this time. Like, what's your social support like? When things are hard, is there someone you can call? Is there anyone in your community you would feel comfortable letting watch the baby so you can rest or have some time to yourself? And I think new parents really need to hear that all new parents need breaks, that parenting is, especially parenting a newborn, is round the clock, grueling, very hard work. And everybody needs a break. And this is one of the challenges with the virtual support, because at this point in the conversation, you might help them get a break. But if we're virtual, we can't do that kind of hands-on thing, but we might be able to help them figure out a plan and a way to get their need for support met. And if they're feeling kind of hopeless and like they really don't feel like they have any family or friends that can help them, we would want to help pay for a babysitter. And we've done that before. We had one mom recently who was very ill and didn't have any family or friends to provide the adequate support that she needed. And she had just had her third baby. And so we paid for her older two to go to childcare, so she could at least have less of a burden. So if the natural support system is not adequate, we still have resources for that. And we want people to use those resources because it can really help them recover and reduce the stress level for the whole family. Who's doing the cooking? If we're willing to bring a meal, and if the family lives in a reasonable distance from our home, and that's a way we want to support them, that's a lovely way to support a family during this time. Or help with errands. If you need anything from the grocery store, they can, we try not to front our own funds, but you can let them know, like, if you want to give me some money, I can grab some things for you, or you can call in your order and I'll pick it up, that kind of thing. So thinking about listening some more and what makes a good listener. So I had to think about this because my tendency is to totally interrupt people and redirect people. So I've had to put those first because I know that's my weakness. I tend to want to jump right in all the time, and I have to actively resist that when I'm talking to families. It does not necessarily come naturally to me. Sometimes if we just let people pause while they're talking, just pause for like 3 to 5 seconds, they'll actually go on and like say more things. And, it helps us get a fuller picture of what's going on for them. So that practicing the pause is a good one. And I have to add that in here later. I'll just make a note of that. Resisting redirection, of course, this is, especially tough when people are sharing about their experience as a parent and about their birth in particular. And the discussions of birth really does bring up a lot of memories for any of us who have gone through that experience ourselves or know people that have, and we may want to redirect. So that's another thing to try to avoid. Let them have their moment to share just about their birth and be focused on them for that time. Especially For on the phone support, if we're only on the phone, we really want to use frequent vocalization to let people know we're listening. And that can just be, like making we don't even have to be a word, just like, using that kind of, I'm not going to act them out because that's going to sound really awkward, but I think you all know what I'm talking about. Letting them know we're listening. And nodding our heads if we're on video chat is really helpful. Smiling when appropriate. And we can get really close to the camera so they can really see our eyes and that we're really focused on them. You can definitely tell on Zoom stuff when people are not focused on the speaker, because their eyes are all over the screen. There's the screen light is flashing, and that's definitely what we would want to avoid. We really want to set aside this time just to listen to this person. And we can be taking notes a little bit more easily in this context than we did before. So if something comes up that is concerning, or a question, or something you want to follow up with, or something you want to encourage them on, you can make a note of it and have a little journal of your time with the person. And taking care of ourselves. So I had a client that was going through a really difficult time, and it was a little emotionally draining for me. I definitely had to decompress a bit and clear my mind after, and have a cup of tea, and a couple of times I had to talk to some coworkers, just because it felt like a lot for me to carry on my own. It wasn't that anyone was going to be harmed. It just felt kind of heavy, and it was really helpful to be able to talk about it with my coworkers. That was probably the most helpful thing. So definitely in cases when anyone's in danger of being harmed, but anytime that it feels a little heavy, please contact us for support, the Good Beginnings staff. Or, we're going to start having these purple coffee hours on Zoom monthly now that we're into the fall, and we'll have more time to connect about and talk about what's going on for families with each other. They may feel like they're the only ones who are struggling. So if they've shared with us that things have been really hard for them, they may even blame themselves that they're struggling, when in reality it's a lack of support that's the main problem, and we're there to reassure them that they're not to blame and that we're here to help them. We can't stress that enough. You're not alone, you're not to blame, and with the right help, I know you'll be feeling better soon, and I'm here to help you get that. Reminding them that many new parents struggle, and if we struggled ourselves, it's okay to share that. Sometimes sharing our personal struggle and how we've gotten through it now can really help them see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that there is an end to the newborn time, and things do get easier. We have a list of local therapists that specialize in perinatal mental health. We don't want anyone feeling alone without options for treatment. And our postpartum angels are a primary bridge to getting those resources. They can call our PSI helpline and be connected with local resources. So the PSI helpline, I'll add to this as well when I send the slides out, but that is also easily found on our website and Google. So Postpartum Support International helpline. Any questions or comments at this point? Anything to add?
I have a question. I was thinking about, this is all about the virtual part, and for people who have opted to do that. And then there was the, dropping off a meal, which I realized you can do contact free. What about if it's okay with you and okay with the parents, taking the baby out for a walk in the stroller? Is that something that would be okay?
I think so. If you're comfortable and the family's comfortable, and you just walk kind of in circles in the nearby vicinity, I think that's
right.
Totally fine. Yep. I think we're pretty hesitant about being on a separate premises with babies. So as long as they were within earshot and you could easily get the baby back in in a moment or two, I think that would be totally fine. And it's a great question, because we're in this time when there's all these different things to cross-reference, and we need to assess what people are comfortable with, what they need, what we can do, and what we're comfortable with in our role. But that is totally in the scope of what we can do. Yeah, I think that's lovely. Any other?
So
Yeah.
can I ask about that? So you're saying it's okay to have contact with the baby physically?
I think
On the books, or
I think if they were in a stroller and you were masked and you felt comfortable, you know, like I recently told a family that I wouldn't be having close contact with the baby because I'm doing in-person visits. And I asked them, like, I can cook for you, I can fold laundry on this end of the house or in this end of the room, and I'm happy to talk to you when you're on that end of the room, and we'll all be masked. But I am not able to hold the baby because I don't feel comfortable with it. But so I wouldn't do it. But if someone else is comfortable, I wouldn't. We don't have any rules or policies about that at this point. People need to figure out their own comfort level. But for the assumption of this model, the virtual model, is that we wouldn't be in person. But if we learn that there's a dire need and we know that we're willing to do it, there's nothing wrong, I think, with offering it. That said, the person might have chosen the virtual model because they don't want visits. So we have to weigh all of those things.
okay. What about if they have or question about isolation? So, in the past there were resources like play groups in person and library story hours and playgrounds to go to, and
The list goes on and on, right?
like play space indoors, and now we're coming into the months. What kind of guidance should we put out there?
The best suggestion that I have right now is to encourage people to maximize their access of remote services like the Baby Circle Time, which is a weekly social support group, and babies are welcome. The in-person strolls are another great option. And it's true, there are far less in-person options, and the ones that are available, I want to really encourage people to take advantage of. So acknowledging and acknowledging that there might be grief over the fact that we can't do these things. I've heard from, like one mother cried to me on the phone that she couldn't take her children to story times. That was something she thought she would do every week, until her kids were in preschool, and they missed the library terribly. So, and that's hard. And I don't want to just slap a Band-Aid and, on that. I want to really honor that that's a loss in our lives. To not have that is a loss. And there are still things we can do. As it happens, Good Beginnings is having a My First Halloween stroll the day before Halloween, where we're encouraging people to wear costumes. And of course, we'll have our masks on and we'll stay apart from each other. But we're going to celebrate Halloween outdoors, and that's something we can do safely in person. So if that's something they're really craving, that's a good option. But yeah, there's really not a whole lot otherwise, other than the virtual options. Does anyone have any other, do you want to add anything to that maybe resources that I'm not aware of that?
No, but maybe I think I haven't seen anything lately, but I know that like children's book authors have been having online, reading their books or um, different stuff, like the guy, Mo Willems, who wrote the Pigeon books.
Love
He had an awesome series of videos and, sort of things like that, which were great. But maybe even local libraries could point them in certain directions like that. But like kids story hours online, or arts and crafts activities, it's hard to do when you don't have all the materials at home, but it can be as simple as just drawing,
Right.
like he did.
Yes, those are great suggestions. And I think the libraries are desperate for people to engage with them, because I think they have amazing resources and people are getting creative for sure. I love the children's book authors reading aloud. I mean, that's incredible. How cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and I've also heard of some musicians having like drive-in concerts, and those are good options too. There's, I think, broadening the idea of like getting out in the community to include some of those other things and the virtual things that are going on too. Something I can share that may be interesting is part of the baby circle. The virtual baby circle is a baby circle directory, so that the families who make connections in that context can say, yes, I'd like my contact information shared in this Google Doc. And they have been actually making outside, like, connections outside the group. So that is awesome, because then they can negotiate for themselves. They can say, oh, okay, I made a connection with this person. I'd like to stay connected with them. Like, I can reach out to them. They can reach out to me directly. We can have our own friendship launched out of this group. So that's something I think that we're starting to see more now that group has been up and running since April. So that's a really cool thing to just let families know that, like, it's possible to make friends this way. Like, and friendship, those kinds of friendships that you make in this season of your life can last a very long time, and really encouraging kinds of things. Yeah. Let's see here. There was, okay, questions to avoid asking. So I've listed a couple of things I try to avoid. The how are you? How are you? Because normally you get such detail, and there's a tendency for people to have a stiff upper lip. So she says, how are you? And the woman says, I'm fine. But really she's thinking, I'm overwhelmed, I'm terrified, I'm sleep deprived, I'm sorry I had the baby. No, really, I mean, I love my baby, but I don't feel good. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't think straight. I don't even recognize myself. I just don't feel like myself. I'm irritable all of the time. I'm miserable much of the time, and I can't breathe. I mean, that's like intense. But that's not the kind of thing you're gonna say when someone asks you, how are you? I think there's a way to avoid that question, of like being more specific, of like, how is this going, or how is that going, to give more space for conversation. Oh, don't you think this is the best time of your life? Of course. Well, I mean, how else are you going to answer that question? Of course it is. But really, there's a lot more going on there. I often talk to families about, it's possible to feel more than one way about becoming a parent at the same time. Like, we can be feeling, 1,000 different ways about it. It's very multifaceted, and there's things we love and there's things that feel horrible about it, and sometimes very frightening and scary. Some people experience real trauma during this time. It's more common than we realize. And at the same time feel an overwhelming love for their baby, and are happy to be a parent. So very complex. Do you need anything? This is like one of the lesser of the evils as far as annoying questions goes, but it's still not a good question just because it's not specific and there's so many things a postpartum person needs, especially a primary caregiver of a newborn. So we know that they need a lot of things. We don't need to ask them if they need anything because they do need things, but we can be specific about how we can help them. So like, rather than asking that open-ended question about what they need, we can tell them exactly how we can support them. Can I listen, is there anything you want to talk about? I'd love to listen to you. Can I deliver a meal? Can I help you with some laundry? Can I run an errand? Can I help you find more resources for that or whatever it is? More resources for social support or more resources for childcare. Can I read your older child a book while you go take it? I mean, like literally you can do that over Zoom. If the older child's there and you want to read them a book while the mom takes a shower and the baby's taking a nap, that's okay too. The closure process is important here, just like with the in-person visits. And this is something we're kind of trying to firm up a bit more because it seems like people are having a hard time, especially during COVID, I think, when it's time to wrap up. So we've had probably 3 or 4 volunteers pilot this. And what we've heard, and I've experienced this too, is that there's this like longing, I think, that the families have to kind of keep the calls going. And we've had a few families reach out to us after the calls have ended. And I'm glad that when they do, but it's just good to have clarity around the parameters of the program. So I like to give them a heads up around the 8th visit. And I usually say something like, I can't believe we're 2 months in. You've come so far. Look at how well you're doing. And I try to like point out all the things that they've been doing well and commend them for that and remind them that we have only 4 more weeks for our calls. And then I follow up quickly with, to let them know they're not being abandoned. I'll let them know Good Beginnings wants to stay connected with you even after our calls wrap up. Would you like anyone from Good Beginnings? I mean, this is like for a volunteer to say, not me, obviously, because I'm part of the staff, but would you like us to check in with you about continued services and support even after the 12 weeks have wrapped? Because in a situation where maybe a family is going through a really hard time, we wouldn't want to just, hightail it out of there. We would want to like maybe extend it another 3 or maybe more weeks, maybe 3 weeks. And we have done that before for families who really couldn't afford to lose our support. And it's not hard and fast. So if a volunteer is really done and can't extend their time with the family because of whatever's going on in their own life, we would take on continuing with that family and making sure that we maintained a connection with them. And that is a good time also to check in with me about any needs that were noticed that maybe are still unresolved. So we can have like a little case management meeting around the time when the family is transitioning out of the program. So I know what's going on with them and where we can still support them. And sometimes the volunteers stay connected, sometimes they don't. I've certainly grown attached to families and many of our volunteers have, and that's okay. And some of us stay connected with certain families and some of us don't stay connected with other families. So I just encourage volunteers to do what feels right to them and to access support from us if there's any concerns about wrapping up with a family. So any questions about that process? Okay. Well, that's all the info I have to share right now. Certainly, if you have any thoughts at any point now or later, please write me or share them here now. This is very much still coming together, and I really want to utilize you guys are one of our greatest assets and resources with all your experience. So if there's any ideas that come up.
Little thing. I have an idea or a question or request. You had suggested, reaching out either in between calls or to try and get an initiation going on, or to stay regular with your calls. And I like the idea of sending little messages, I guess, snippets or either pictures or motivational quotes or whatever. But it might be nice if Good Beginnings had like a inventory of little things that we could text over, links, or like, hey, here's a suggested link on getting more sleep, or anything like breastfeeding related, or something they can, like a tool they can specifically either, something quick that they can look at, and just to keep Good Beginnings in their mind, and us too as a volunteer. My dog is going to bark. Sorry. That would be very helpful, so that I don't have to surf the web and find these things and then wonder if it's appropriate, or if it's something you would, Macy, stop, you would, want us to pass on.
I love that
So
so much. Thank you for
so
that.
that would be great if you had like 10 or 12, like 12. Okay, so 12 things
Per
since
week,
it's
right?
12 weeks,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like at least 12 things that we could use. And it could be, on a variety of topics, so that if there's something we had discussed with someone and we could use it as a follow-up or as a way to get the conversation going for the next visit.
Yes.
That would be great, because
This
it can also be like helpful to have things to talk about or to ask about. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love the bringing up a topic, with the resource for that topic, and then following up with them. What did you think of that? And I think that's great. And we can.
Yeah. Also, I don't know. Did you see? I haven't read the article, but I saw a headline on the New York Times website about new mothers during COVID times.
Can you say that again?
So the New York Times had an article recently about new parents during the pandemic. Did you read that?
I've seen a few.
Okay. Okay. So I don't know if that's something, or if it's too much information to pass on to new parents, but definitely to circulate among volunteers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things like that, like any current news about this very particular issue might be helpful too for volunteers.
I agree. I think it would be for sure. And I think I love this package also, like putting together the topics. That's something we can totally do. And also the articles for volunteers, we can bring those into our newsletters. And I'll look for that most recent New York Times ones to see, because I do think it's it's a high calling doing this work now. There's a real need. Families are struggling right now. We know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for them to know they're not alone.
Right.
But that we can back with, this sort of evidence might just drive the point home for people,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as you're searching for those resources, if you can find good ones, like thinking about YouTube as a search engine, I think there are going to be a lot of moms that reading an article is going to be less doable for them than watching a video.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Having some variety in how, There was recently a video that went viral on Instagram with a mom, like she was clearly acting, but she had like a little baby, and she was looking in the mirror, and she was like crying, and her hair was a mess, and she just really just desperate. And then she leaned in and touched the mirror, and it miraculously like sped ahead 15 years, and she's feeling good. She's looking better, and her son comes and gives her a big hug. And it seemed to really touch a nerve with a lot of people, because they Postpartum Support International saw an uptick in calls to the helpline associated with that very post, because people are like, wow, like I'm really struggling. This is not normal. And it gave them a little bit of hope to reach out for help. And I think having that hope to reach out and knowing you're not alone, just really helps. It just brings down the obstacle to getting it, to actually getting the help, when you have hope, when you realize you're not alone. So I really appreciate those great ideas. And yeah, please, if something comes to you and you want to reach out more to me, I love to have your feedback.
Yeah, I thought of two things, connecting with what you just said with the things to avoid. And you kind of talked about this in terms of saying, like, isn't being a new mom great? I can see the temptation for volunteers who are parents to say, like, this is so much easier than when they're toddlers or when they're teenagers, or, kind of minimizing their experience, which could be really frightening if you're having a hard time with your newborn. The other thing I wanted to bring up is way pre-COVID, when I was in the classroom. I couldn't remember the name of it, but I looked it up. There's a website called storylineonline.net, and it's like SAG actors reading kids' books, and it's got a huge number of them, and you can search by, you can look at Black Lives Matter, you can look up and find books about that. So you can find lots and lots of different things. So that would be another good resource.
That sounds amazing. It's Storyline Online, Storyline.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just, there's no spaces. It's just storylineonline.net.
Okay. That sounds great too. You guys are like writing my next newsletter for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it was a pleasure to be in Zoom with you guys.
Oh, so I have one question, actually, like a housekeeping sort of question.
Sure.
So you want our visits about our calls, but what about, like, so for instance, if one reason or another we had plans to have a meeting and then the plans change, but we have like a back and forth of texts going on. Do we have to report on that? What do you want us to, like, how much of that do you want us to report on?
Well, that's another gray area. It's a really good question. I've certainly I've had that experience over this time, and I do think I do want to quantify that. There is some, the fact that there's some connection happening. I kind of would like to know, especially if it's substantive, like if you gave a resource, or if they said they were struggling and you had a back and forth text with them. If it was substantive in some way, I would want to know about it. If it felt like you were providing support, even just over email or text. To me, that's something that is valuable and important. I wouldn't, if I didn't hear from you guys in like a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, sometimes I tend to think like things are okay, and then when it gets to the like 3-4 weeks, then I start to wonder, and then I'm like reaching out to volunteers and families to see if anything is happening. So just because there's a handful of volunteers, so it does help for me to know, like, we haven't had a call in 2 weeks, and this is what's been going on. And we can work together. Maybe there's an issue, a connectivity issue or something, or the family has other things going on, and it's hard for them. Maybe it's not working for them the way they thought it would. So I would want to know if weeks are going by and no actual calls have happened.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
How are the weekly baby strolls go? Have you had a good turnout? What's going on there?
So we've had, this summer, they were really popular, and we had a pretty steady group of at least 3 to 5 at each of them. And we rotated them around central Vermont in different towns. And that went really well, so well that we decided we would continue them in a way that was more sustainable for us as a staff. So we have them going in Montpelier every Friday morning now, and we have had seen a little bit of a drop in attendance, but we expect a good showing for the Halloween stroll because it's a theme, and we're going to be offering hot cider and donuts and snacky things. So I'm hoping that that serves as a little bit of the catalyst and to get people to who can to attend more regularly. I don't know what's going to happen with it. We're going to do it all year long, regardless of the weather. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Good. Great. Good. I want to encourage the family I'm working with now. I want to encourage that just because I think it's one of the very few, where you can actually connect in person.
Yeah.
With people in this community. So
absolutely.
And also for the volunteers to connect with the families if we go and join them there, and it's in a neutral place and it's already pre-planned, whatever. So it's great. So I'm hoping that works out at some point.
I love that.
Having you there.
I love the volunteer being there. I mean, there's so many benefits to that for the family because it's someone they know already. And it's a little bit less intimidating than showing up to a group of people you don't know. So I love it if the volunteer is able to do that. That's wonderful.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time on a Sunday. Thank you. And look forward to connecting more soon, and have a great evening and week ahead.
You too. Okay.
Thank you.